Sorry for the late start. Let's go ahead and get right into what we were doing on Tuesday. Before that, I just posted the lecture slides from last Friday. I posted the lecture slides. I just posted the screencast from Friday. I was out of town in a place kind of remote this weekend, so and their internet was out, so I wasn't able to upload the screencast until about an hour ago. But that's available now. The lecture slides I posted on Saturday. Let's pick up where we left off on Friday. We were talking about PHP. We went through some of the basics of PHP, declaring variables, how PHP is executed on the server, and then how it generates HTML and sends that back to the browser. You're working on an example. This was our example. We did a little bit of layout to start off with, and then we got into writing a PHP for loop. Let's go take a look at that. We wrote a for loop to factor out the redundancy in our club song. It repeatedly spits out the 99 bottles of beer song. So we started off with that. I want to go through do a couple more things with PHP in this file. Maybe we can declare a couple of variables. I'd like to do that. To start off with, I like to do all of my PHP stuff sort of at the beginning. Some of the PHP stuff at the beginning of the file, like declaring variables, and as we'll do today, like loading files and things like that. So I think I'm going to sort of do a couple of things. I'm going to declare a variable like beer blog, page name equals beer blog. And so this is the name of the document, and maybe I can just output this somewhere, a couple of different places. So in order to output this, I'm going to use, what's this syntax called? We looked at this on Friday. Anybody remember? It's kind of an arcane term. It's called the expression block. It's slightly different from the regular PHP opening and closing. Instead of PHP after the question mark, you have an equals sign after the question mark. It's a very common error to forget this, the equals sign. If you forget the equals sign, it's actually equivalent to this. Some PHP servers allow you to, equivalent to the opening PHP thing without the PHP. If you delete the PHP, some PHP servers are configured to allow you to forget the PHP at the beginning of this, and it's just a regular PHP block. So if you leave off in an expression block, if you leave off the equal sign, it's equivalent to just saying like, up here, just saying like, page name, semicolon, which just does nothing. It's just like a no op. You're not assigning it to anything, you're not assigning anything to it, you're not printing it, you're not doing anything. But this, with an equal sign, is equivalent to saying PHP print. That's what this is equivalent to. So don't forget the equal sign. If you forget the equal sign, it doesn't work. Okay, so there's that, and we can maybe use that a couple of other places on the page. So beer blog, we can, let's see, I have beer blog here. Maybe I'll output it there. Whatever. We can just output this variable anywhere we want. Let's do some other stuff. Maybe we'll have a variable that keeps track of the version of this page. Maybe we're on the 3rd version of this page, and we can say that p new version exclamation point new version 3.0 version 3. Let's go to the top. New version 3. Our CSS is sort of interfering with this. Let's move it down. Oh, that's in the header. I don't want it in the header. I want it down here. There we go. Somewhere. Okay. What else do we want to do? We've got a little bit of redundancy involved in the listing of these chapters here. The only thing that's different between each of these is the city name. So we're going to see, once we start getting into today's slides, we're going to see how to factor out that redundancy a couple of different ways. Let's see, what else do I want to do? Let's do something with string interpolation. I can just declare a variable foo, and then I can just, if I want to print at the top of this document, I can say print. Now I'll say Morgan. Hi, my name is Foo. And this will inject the value of foo into this string. Just a simple example of what's called string interpolation, injecting another value inside of another, injecting one value inside of another. What's the special rule about strings and being interpolated? If I modified this string slightly, it would not be interpolated. How would I modify it? Single quotes, right? So if I switch this to be single quotes instead of double quotes, so let's just check that this works with single quotes. Hi, my name is Morgan. If we switch this to single quotes, it'll say, hi, my name is $foo. Right? So strings are interpolated inside double quotes and not inside single quotes. So I like to do a lot of variable declaration and stuff at the top of the document. I probably wouldn't print up here, but I would also include my comments up here. So I can say beer.php, beer blog page, Morgan Ducey, 2013. Okay, so I'd include my header authorship comment up here. What's the difference between including a header authorship comment up here and a header authorship comment down here inside the HTML? Where would we rather put it? Yeah. Up at the top? Yeah, why? It's probably better. I mean, you can kind of put it wherever you like, but yeah, so I mean this is a PHP document now, not just an HTML document, but a PHP document. And so anybody reading the source of the PHP document that's what you really want to document. And you might have some complex things in this file, some functions and things that need documenting. And really the document is no longer just an HTML document. So the first stuff that we have up here is PHP code. So the first stuff that we see is going to be PHP. We might as well document it in PHP. Obviously, we couldn't take this outside of the PHP block. You'll notice that my syntax highlighting is no longer working because we're back in HTML mode. I could just switch this to HTML commenting. I would probably rather not do that. Inside of a PHP document, I sort of prefer to do documentation in PHP. So inside the PHP block. In fact, even if I didn't have all of this stuff at the top of the document, I would still probably comment inside of the PHP block. But oftentimes I have some stuff up here to sort of prepare the page. Okay. Let's do one thing here. Let's say stable equals false. Maybe this version of this document is like an alpha version and it's not really stable. So I can come down here and I can do, I want to output information about whether or not this page is stable. I can say if stable, I can output, a message that says this is the stable version. Else, this page is unstable, beware. So that'll appear down here underneath version 3. This page is unstable, beware. If I switch this to true, this is a stable version. What if I switch this to say stable equals version? Probably wouldn't want to do that, but what will happen? Yeah, so 3, the value 3 evaluates to true. 3 is truthy in PHP. So it'll still say that it's a stable version. Okay, I'll just leave this as true. Okay, let's move on to some of today's material. Okay. So in PHP, we also have the concept of arrays. Arrays are very useful in most programming languages. And in PHP, they're really flexible. They're really nice, easy to use. You just declare an array using array paren paren. This is not a capitalized A. This is just a lowercase array. This isn't technically like if this looks a little bit like an object instantiation, but that's not actually what it is. It's just a special thing in the language. So array paren paren, that declares a new array. If you want initial values, you just can list the initial values. You access an index in square brackets, just like usual. You can set values to a particular index. This is something that's probably new. You can append to an array just by using square brackets without an index. And that adds at the end of the array. So a bracket 0 is 23, puts that there. Right, there we go. So arrays are fairly straightforward. The major thing that you probably want to keep in the back of your mind is that in order to get the length of an array, you pass it to the count function. So you say count, parentheses, and then the array that you want to get the count of. This is different from Java, where in Java arrays are objects, and so you say the array dot length paren paren in order to get the length of the array. This is a procedural language. PHP is largely procedural, so we're going to pass it to the count function instead of doing dot something on it. So for $i equals 0, $i less than count of the TAs, $i plus plus, we're iterating over each of these TAs. And let's see, at the ith index of the TAs list, we're setting it to be the stir to lower of itself. So we're iterating over the elements of the TAs list, and we're lowercasing each one of them. Then we can use stacks and queues sorts of functions on arrays. We can shift, unshift, pop, push. We can also reverse an array and sort it, and we can get a portion of the array. Lots of these are, I often use push and pop, shift and unshift a little bit less frequently, but you can use them as much as you want. Reverse is somewhat useful sometimes, and so is slice. The for each loop. So we've learned the for loop. The for each loop is probably a little bit more useful. It's more frequently used in PHP. And the reason why is it's super easy. If you want to iterate over the entire length of an array, if you don't need to iterate over just a portion of an array, or if you don't need to just loop within a certain numbered bounds, if you have just an array of stuff you want to iterate over, then you can use the for each loop, and it'll just each time through the loop it'll assign a new element from the array to this variable, and then you can use that variable inside the for each loop. So it's super easy. Rather than doing a numeric index to get the ith element each time, you just say, we have an array of stooges, for each stooges as stooge, so each time through the loop it'll put a new stooge in this variable stooge, and then we can say mo slaps stooge. Of course, the second time through the loop, mo will slap mo. So he'll even slap himself. Convenient way to loop over each element without indices. So in general, if you need to iterate over the entire array, then you should use a for each loop. There are some circumstances in which you might not want to do that, especially if, like in this example, you have to modify any of the elements in the array. If you modify, I believe if you modify this variable stooge inside of the for each loop, it won't modify the original in the array. Did I see a hand up there? Was that your question? Okay. Functions in PHP. We declare functions with just a function. We give it a name, list all the parameters, and we have statements inside of it. So BMI takes two variables, height and weight, and calculates the result and returns it. Functions work pretty much the same way as in Java, although we don't have any explicit types in the return value or in the parameters. So there's no int weight or int height, and there's no int for the function return value. They can be declared anywhere you like. Although I usually like to put functions at the end of my files, just because they're a little bit more complex, and I don't want to have to read through all the functions in order to see the main contents of my HTML page. So why don't we go ahead and let's see. Let's go ahead and write a function here. I want to let's factor out a little bit more redundancy here. I want to output the list of navigation links, and we'll notice that there's some stuff in here that repeats a lot. So we've got chapters with a capital C here, we've got chapters with a capital C here, we've got chapters with a capital C here. And it's the same for each one of these. Blogs, about, home. So each one of these is pretty much the same. So if I want to, I can declare an array, and I can iterate over the array, and for each element of the array, I can output home or about or chapters. I can output a new sort of area of my website. So maybe I'll start by putting the for each loop up here. I can declare an array. Oops, array called site sections or something equals array home about members. Oh, chapters before members. Chapters, members, blogs. Okay, so that's my array, and I'm going to iterate over that using a for each loop. So for each site sections as section, I'm going to output something that looks just like this. So I'll select one of these and move it in here and use that as my template. You can delete the rest of these LIs. And then anywhere I have home, I'm just going to replace that with something that I'm just going to replace that with this section here. So section section. Is that right? Still working. Is this right? No, why is this not right? Yeah, this is just, I'm in HTML mode still. I haven't actually switched back to PHP mode so that it outputs the variable, the PHP variable. So I need to have what? An expression block. So this expression block outputs the section variable. So section. There we go. Okay, so I'm outputting the section variable in there 3 times. I'm going to go back and refresh, and we should see no change really. So we're now outputting this list of LIs dynamically. It's sort of uncommon to have file names that begin with, so our file names here do begin with capital letters, but if our file names did not begin with capital letters, we could just pass this through a function. We could say stir to lower, which is the PHP function for converting a string to all lowercase, and that would output the lowercase versions of the icons, which looks like Firefox is still loading, even though the file names themselves actually have capitals. Okay, what else do we want to do? Oh, I wanted to put that in a function. So I sort of want to, this is a somewhat complex portion of the page, and I don't really, it sort of decreases readability a little bit. So I kind of want to move this to elsewhere. I want to move this elsewhere. I want to write a function that I can call to output this stuff. So I'm going to move the entire navigation section down into a function at the bottom of my file. I'm going to put a whole function section down here. I'm going to say function output nav. Okay. And this function's goal will be to output the navigation stuff. And then I'm just going to call navigate output nav up here. PHP output nav. There we go. We've moved that portion down to the bottom into its own separate function. And the great thing about this is that the HTML document becomes a little bit more of a concise summary of what's happening. We don't have this really unreadable block sort of interfering with stuff. But I see that there's a function call here, and the function describes accurately and intuitively what's happening here. It's going to output the navigation portion of the site. So that's a good way of making your page a little bit more readable. Sometimes with complex PHP blocks, a website can get, the HTML portion of your page can get really complex and difficult to read. So this is one way of helping out with that. An important thing about variable scope in functions, in most programming languages that we are probably familiar with, function scope works a little bit differently than in PHP. PHP, it's a little bit special. In most programming languages, you would expect that if you declare a variable outside of a function, a global variable to that document, that variable would be available by default inside of that function. But it turns out that's not the case in PHP. The way in PHP everything works is that as soon as you start a function, you get a completely blank slate variable scope. And you have to explicitly import variables from outside of the function scope into the function. And in order to do that, you just say global $school. That imports the school variable from the global function, from the global scope. So in order to use this school variable inside of here, I have to have this global school at the top of this function. Otherwise, once I get down here, I'm using a variable inside of this string that hasn't been declared yet inside of this function. If I didn't have this here, the contents of that variable would be undefined. Yeah.
What's the difference between that and just submitting it as a parameter and passing it?
You could pass it as a parameter, yeah. Same difference, yeah. The circumstances under which you would want to pass it as a parameter versus import it from global scope are slightly different. And it has to do with whether something is like a constant maybe in the entire document, or like a, I don't know. If you would call this function for different things, for different schools, for example, you would want to make it a parameter. But if it's something that's sort of like a global configuration thing for the entire document, then it'd be fine to leave it as a global. Okay. You can also have default parameter values if you'd like in functions for which you do this. For parameters for which you do this, it becomes optional to pass that parameter. So if the person doesn't, if when this is called, this second parameter is not passed, this variable here will default to this string. So I can either call it with one parameter or two parameters. If I call it with one parameter, inside this function, the separator variable will be defined as this. If I pass it as two, then whatever is passed for the second value will go into separator. So this is a convenient thing, a way of sometimes allowing for certain defaults. So print separated, here we're taking a string and a separator, and if they don't pass a separator, then we'll use this as the default. So when we pass with one parameter, it results in H, comma, E, comma, L, comma, O. And if we do, then it results in that. Okay. In PHP, we also, oftentimes we want to read to and write from files. One of the great things about having a server-side programming language, we'll talk about a client-side programming language later on the quarter, but one of the great things about using a server-side programming language is that you can store data in a central location so that that data can be viewed by all clients of the website. And in order to do that, one of the ways that we can do that is using files. There are three primary file functions that you want to get familiar with. File, file get contents, and file put contents. There's also, these other ones are ones that we'll be using. We're going to be using base name and glob. We'll probably not be using scandir. I don't really like scandir. We can also use file exists to see if a file exists. Base name gives you the name of the file. So if you pass in a file path with directories and the file extension and so on, it'll just cut off the directories and give you the name of the file itself. We can check to see if it's readable, writable. We can copy a file, rename it, move it, delete it, stuff like that. Make our own directories and things like that. But we're going to focus mostly on reading and writing files. And there are two primary ways of reading and writing files in PHP. There's the file function and the file get contents function. Actually, these are both for reading a file. And so these are two options for reading a file, and there's a significant difference between the way these work. The file function looks at this file and returns to you the entire contents of that file in an array. So it splits the file up into lines, and each element of the array is a line in the file. The file get contents function returns the entire contents of a file as a string. So just a single string with all the contents of the file. And then you'll have to manually, if you want to split it up into lines, then you're going to have to manually split it up yourself. And then file put contents accepts a string, and it just outputs that string into that file. One of the great things about the file function is because of the fact that it returns an array, you can just iterate over that array immediately with a for each loop. So if you want to do something with each line in this document, and you want to treat each line differently, you can iterate over the list of lines in the file. If you want to, So an important thing to notice is that, so back here, so this is an array representing the contents of this file. And you notice that even though it split them up on new lines, each element that's returned still has the new line at the end of it. Which in some circumstances that's not very important, but in other circumstances it's really important. So for example, if one of these elements we're using for the name of a file, we're injecting that element into the name of a file, we can't have a new line in the name of a file. So we're going to have to make sure that that new line is not there. One of the ways you can do that is you can add this extra parameter to the file function. File ignore new lines. This is a PHP constant that just turns, sets a parameter in the file function that returns everything without new lines at the end of it. So that's a great thing to use. If we use, for example, file get contents returns the entire file's contents as a string, in which case we're going to have to split it up manually in some way. One of the ways that we can do that is with the explode function. The explode function explodes on this delimiter here. So if we explode CSE space 190 space M, then that results in an array containing CSE and then 190 and then M. If we want to then join that array back together, we can implode on this three dots here, and it'll join CSE ... 190 ... M. If you want to do more complex string splitting, you can use regular expressions, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. An example with explode, so this is the contents of a file called names.txt. We're going to iterate over the contents of names.txt, and for each line we're going to call it name. And then each name we're going to split up on spaces into tokens, into 3 tokens. So we can output author tokens bracket 2 comma tokens bracket 0, author step Marty, Miller Jessica, cursed Victoria. So we're getting the 3 different components of the line by splitting each line on a space. But doing this is sort of ugly, having this tokens array here. This is pretty ugly, using square brackets and indices to refer to each portion of the name. I would much rather be able to refer to each portion of the name as first name, middle initial, last name. That'd be a lot more intuitive in our code. So a better alternative to that is to do this. It's the list construct in PHP. This allows you to unpack an array into several different variables, a variable for each component of that array. So if this is our personal.txt file, each line in this file is a different component about Marty Steps information. We're going to load this personal.txt file, and each element of that array will be a separate thing that we're putting into a different variable. So the first element of the array is name, the second is phone, the third is SSN. And then if we want to split up the telephone number even more, we can just split that into area code, prefix, and suffix by exploding it. So this is, it's not technically a function, it's another funky PHP language construct, but it allows you to put all of the elements in an array into separately named variables. Super useful. Okay, so let's do some of that. I would like to factor out the redundancy here in this list of cities here. I want to store the list of cities in a file, and I want to output this list of cities by loading that file and outputting each one individually. So I happen to have a text file here called cities. And this has a list of the cities where there's a BRN blog. And this file, in addition to the names of the cities, they have some additional other information about the city, like the population of the city or like the year it was founded and stuff. So I'm going to have to actually extract the name of the city from this document in order to use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this file by saying, for example, cities equals array. Oops. There are two different ways that we could load it into an array. What's the first? Probably the easiest one. We just use the file function. So cities.txt. By default, if we don't include like directory information or anything, it'll just look in the current directory. So we're going to load the cities.txt from the current directory, and then I'll iterate over that for each cities as city. And I'll copy this up here and use that as my template. So BRN blog city. Okay. I could make this a little bit more concise if I wanted to. I can move the file function down here, eliminate this intermediate variable, and then because this is a one line like for each loop, it's okay if I sort of condense this into a single line. This is one of the things mentioned in the style guide. It's okay if you have just like a single line for each loop and like just a single curly brace at the end of it. Then it's a little bit more concise if you put that all on one line. So that's what I'm going to do. For each file, cities as city, BRN blog city. Okay. Let's refresh that. Okay. Okay, so we forgot about the fact that on each line of the file, we're going to have to actually extract the name of the city. So we're going to have to do that. Let's go look at the source real quick. So you'll notice that this line, so this for each city in this file, we have the contents of the line. And then at the end, there's a line break, right? So this closing LI appears on the next line. How would we prevent that from happening? Yeah, so we can say file ignore new lines. My editor made that green, so it recognizes that. If we refresh it now, now there's no new line at the end of that. So this is becoming a little bit more complicated. This line's becoming a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to go ahead and sort of undo that stuff I just did. I'm going to make it multiple lines. Cities equals that. Cities as city. And the other thing I'm going to have to do is extract the name of the city from each line, actually. So what I'll do is I'll say, so what I could do is I could say like, you know, tokens equals, how do I split this, actually maybe I'll call this a line. How do I split this line up? Split? Explode, yeah, so it's not split in PHP. It's a common error to say split because we're used to splitting in other languages. But in PHP it's called explode. So we're going to explode on, I think it's the colon is the delimiter, and we can say line, okay. So I can say tokens bracket 0. But again, tokens bracket 0, I have no idea what that actually means. So how can I assign a useful variable name to that 0th token? So I'm going to replace this with list, and there are 3 tokens on the line. There's the name, there's the date it was founded, and there's the, this can't be the population. I'm not really sure what this is, but number of members. Hey, that's right, number of members. Okay, so let's see, name, date. Maybe that's the date that the Buren blog was founded there. That makes sense. And then members. Okay, name, founding date, members. I'll call this city. Okay, so then we're going to output city. And then maybe we'll just output some more information like members. Members. What if, let's add an additional city here. Let's call it, and there's only one Buren blog member there, and that's me. Of course we have a plural here, and we want to be correct. We want to be grammatically correct, and we want to say one member instead of one members. Any ideas how we could do that? We're probably going to have like an if-else statement, right? So we can say if members equals 1, then we'll say like member plural or something equals s. If members equals 1, members plural equals empty string. Member, members plural. Member, members plural. Okay. A little bit more concise way for us to do this, maybe not more concise, but a slightly more flexible way of doing this, is using what's called the ternary operator. Ternary operator is a little bit confusing, but I'm going to show you anyhow. So I'll just write this out and I'll explain it in a sec. So members equals 1 question mark s, empty string colon s. So this string here, this string of operators, I can select it, this has 3 parts to it. There's a test here. This is sort of like an if, this is basically a condensed if-else statement. So there's a test here. It checks to see whether members equals 1. Question mark, is it equal to 1? If so, then I'm going to output an empty string. Otherwise, colon means else. Otherwise, I'm going to output an s. So what I'm doing right here is I'm testing to see whether members is equal to 1. If so, I won't output anything, so member followed by nothing. If it's not equal to 1, then we're going to say s. So 1 is the only circumstance under which there would be nothing following it. There we go. Excellent. Okay, what else do we want to do? Let's see. Excellent. That looks pretty good. Let's move on to a little bit more stuff. There are 2 main functions for reading directories. I'm just going to sort of skim over Scander because it's not super helpful, not super useful. We're going to be using glob instead for the most part. And what glob does is allows you to get a list of files. A list of files in this directory or another directory. What you specify in the string, in the parameter to glob, is a string with wildcard characters in it, and the wildcard characters allow you to get multiple file names that match that sort of description. So if we want to look inside a directory called poetry, we say poetry / poem star.dat. We'll find any file whose name begins with poem and ends with .dat. So poem.dat would be found, poem1.dat, poem-foo.dat, poem supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.dat, expialidocious, right? And then if we want to get the name of the actual file, if we want to remove the poetry directory and get just the name of the file, we can pass that to base name. So let's see. So we're globbing a list of file names for each poem as poem file. So poem file is the name of this particular file. We can get the contents of it and put that into a variable called text. And then what we're doing here is we're writing back to that same file stir rev of text. So we're reversing the entire contents of that file and writing the reversed contents back to that file. And then we're saying print, I just reversed the name of this file without the directory. So we're using base name to remove the directory name. So we'll just say poem-foo.dat. So the star character is the wildcard character in here. There are several other wildcard characters, but we're pretty much just going to use star. And that can match anything, including nothing. So this is the most useful way of reading a list of files from a directory. Scander, you can also do scander to you specify the name of a directory, and that'll return a list of files in that directory. But the problem with this is it includes these extra directory names. Anybody know what these directories, what these names stand for? As dot and dot dot. These are special names for directories. Anybody know what these stand for? Yeah. He said the root and superdirectory. Close. So dot means the current directory. And then dot dot, yeah, is sort of like the superdirectory. It's parent directory. So dot always means the current directory, and dot dot is its parent directory. And so if you use scander, you're going to have to, oftentimes these are not useful, so you're going to have to skip over them. So you're going to have to say, for each scander as file name, if file name equal dot or equal dot dot, then you have to continue, skip to the next element in the loop, which is a pain. It's much easier to just say for each glob taxes /old because glob doesn't give you dot or dot dot. It also doesn't give you hidden files, anything that begins with dot, but I think scander does give you hidden files, so that's one difference between the two. Okay, reading and writing an entire file, we sort of just did that. File get contents, poem.txt, reverse it, and then write it back. Right. Appending to a file. We can specify an additional optional parameter to file put contents. If we don't want to overwrite the entire contents of the file, oftentimes it's super inefficient if we want to read the entire contents of a file into a string, if it's a really large file that's going to use a lot of memory, only to tack a little bit onto the end of it and then write the entire thing back out again. So oftentimes it's much more efficient if we just want to add to the end of the file. We can add this flag here that says file append, and whatever we specify, this second parameter here, will just be tacked on to the end of the existing file rather than overwriting it completely. Okay. Last little thing I want to look at here is comments, HTML code. If we have a multi-page website that has a common sort of HTML, common theme, for example, our course website, on several different pages we have all this top information here. the header stuff, the links, things like that. But then down here is the only portion where it's different, the lectures portion and the homework portion. How can we avoid redundantly repeating this content or code across multiple pages? Yeah.
Write the header as a PHP, like in HTML, and add all the comments and header in PHP, and then you also just go to PHP for the lecture, and then whatever below that.
Right. Well, there's a function that we can use in PHP that allows us to import a file and output the contents of that file. So we're going to be using that. It's called the include function. So if we have some HTML portion that's the beginning of our document, we can factor that out into a separate file and just say include to import that file and just output its contents. So this is a useful thing to do. We're going to do that with this site. So what we're going to do is we're going to, so maybe we have a separate page. Let's sort of copy and paste this file into a separate page. So maybe it's like blog.php. So on this, in this page, we're actually looking at the blog. I don't have too much blog stuff, so I'm just going to pretend that the news stuff here is like the blog stuff. I'm going to delete everything but the news. Okay. So this is the stuff that's going to be the actual contents of this page. The rest of it up here, like this navigation, the header, all the beginning HTML stuff, this is all stuff that I can just factor out. I'm going to have it on multiple pages. So I can just move all of that stuff out. Maybe I'll delete some of this stuff too. And then what we'll do is we'll say include, header dot, HTML or header.php. And then we'll move all of that common stuff out into that separate file. Now what stuff is common? You'll notice that what I've done here is I've output the name of the page here. That's something interesting that I might want to be able to use if I do this include thing. Because the name of the page is slightly different in, for example, different pages of the course website. If we go to different pages of the course website, I have Wi-Fi off. If we go to different pages of the course website, it adds sort of like home or homework or lectures to the end of the title. So maybe what I'll do is I'll say beer and blog, and then this page name, instead of using that to say beer and blog, I'll say home, or I'll say blog. So in the example of this page, it's going to be home. So if I then say include header.html, then all of this stuff I can copy down into the header. So that stuff, all the way down to the main section. So the main section is where things will start to be different. So header dot, did I make it PHP or HTML? I think I made it PHP over here, HTML there. I'll make it PHP. Okay, so this is, oh yeah, I have to make it PHP because I'm outputting this variable in it. I also need to output this, I need to have this output nav function somewhere. So this output nav function is something that we put all the way down here at the bottom here. I'm going to actually, I'm going to move that to yet another page. I'm going to say include functions.php. This is also a common thing to do, to put anything that you use multiple times in multiple pages in a separate PHP file. This, there we go. So this is a document that I'm using just for functions. And let's see, so I'm going to be calling that function here. So I have to make sure that functions.php is always loaded before header.php. So let's see, go back over to blog. We're going to have to paste that there. And the page name over here, we'll change this to blog. So page name here is home. Let's do that down there. Page name over here is blog. And in each case, we're importing the functions file and the header file. The last thing that we're going to need to do is, technically, we're going to have something that closes out the document. This document is closed out, but this other one over here is not. So we'll maybe move this into a file called footer, include footer.php. Footer.php. And technically there's no PHP code in here, but that's okay. We'll just call it .php anyhow. Okay, so we've got several different files here now. And the great thing about include is that it not only opens that file and reads the file, but it also executes any PHP code in that file if it's a PHP file. So let's go back and, let's put the footer back in here. Maybe we'll re-indent this stuff so it's not quite so far over, just so our PHP code looks a little bit cleaner. Okay. That looks pretty good. Go refresh over here. Okay, no change there. Everything looks right. We've got the beginning and ending HTML stuff in the page. That's great. And if we go to blog.php now, we got the header, we've got just the news, we've got the main section, we've got the stuff that was just in blog.php, and then we've got the stuff that's in footer.php. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to cover for today. Right, everything I wanted to cover for today. So don't forget to print out the pre-section problems for tomorrow, and UTAs will see you in section.
What's the difference between single quote and double quote?